We have been in this series we're calling People Like Us, and it's about the things that people like us do together. We've been talking about these 8 different practices that shape us, and they might be new to some of us, but they aren't new to the church. They've been around for a long time, and we're joining in a rich history of people who've practiced similar things. I'm going to date myself a little bit today, off the top, and just say, does anyone remember back in the day you'd go to the video store to rent a movie? You go to rent a DVD or maybe even a VHS, if that was a thing. I remember my Friday and Saturday nights going down there with a friend, looking forward to it, walking into the video store and seeing the wall of endless movies, all kinds of choices. We'd walk down the aisles and try and pick one, like picking was half the night, I think, trying to find what we're actually going to watch. We'd watch these over-the-top, ridiculous 80s action movies or just these B-level movies that weren't actually any good, but we'd laugh at them and kind of roast them when we watched them. You'd finally pick out your film, you'd go to the desk, and you'd check out the movie. I had a membership card with my picture on it. This is a thing that we did. And you check it out, and they say, okay, bring it back in like 2 days. You go home and you watch it. You put the VHS on top of the VCR, and you forget about it. And then 2 days later, you're like, oh no, I have to get that back right now, or they're going to charge me $2 more for this movie, or it's going to be late. And you'd race back to the video store. Back in the day, if you destroyed one of these movies, it was really expensive. It was like $100 for a place a movie. It's insanity. It was a big commitment. I think the video store was one of the first places that I learned about contracts, about commitments. Once you had that thing home, it was a commitment. And you know what? We live in different times now. There's been a shift, not just in technology, although that has changed, but I think culturally as well. It's easier and easier to be non-committal. You gotta cancel anytime. You aren't stuck with the movie for 3 days. On streaming, if the show isn't good, you just turn it off. You pick something else. There's endless options. How many of your past watched feeds are littered full of unfinished movies, unfinished TV shows, because you're like, that wasn't that good. I'll watch something else. There's no penalty to not finish. It's just something you do. We live in a world where commitment has become more and more shallow. Take the gym, for instance. I go to Planet Fitness. I see a lot of you there all the time. And it's like $10, $15 a month to go. It's less than McDonald's is. How do you run a business like a gym for $10 a month? They must have so many memberships. I'm sure that if everyone with memberships showed up one day, they wouldn't fit in the building. Their whole business model is built on people not showing up. That's kind of the whole thing. They make the price just low enough that you're like, it's $10, it's $15, wait, I don't need to go. Like, what's the big deal? I won't even miss it. Think about Amazon. Subscribe and save. How often are you checking out and it's like, subscribe right now and save 15%. And you're like, I'll do that. And as soon as I get it, I'm going to cancel. I know you've done it. I did it this week. I saved 15%. It was a great deal. But it's so easy to just cancel. With movies or gym memberships or detergent, it's not that big a deal. But the thing is, this mindset, this cultural influence can begin to shape us and form us, and these things can spill over into the areas of our life that do matter. In our relationships, in our friendships, in our community. Today we're talking about the 5th practice in our 8 practices, making and keeping commitments. If you read the scriptures, all through the Bible, there's this central theme, an idea of covenant, a commitment between two parties. The Bible actually lays out 5 different covenants. We talked about them here before, a lot of them. There's God's covenant with Noah, his covenant with Abram. He makes a covenant with Israel through Moses. There's a covenant with David. And finally, Jesus says, I have come to make a new covenant. Over and over again, God makes covenants with his people. And today I want to focus on one of those. It's the covenant with Abraham in Genesis chapter 15. In Genesis 15, there's been this conflict in the land. And God comes to Abraham and he's like, Abram, don't be afraid. I'm your protector. It's going to be okay. In fact, your reward is going to be really great. And Abram, he says, God, that's great and all, like nice promise, but I'm childless. I have no one to carry on my lineage. What good is this promise to me? I have no one to receive all that I have. In fact, right now, this guy, Eliezer of Damascus, is going to receive my inheritance. And God says in verse 4, it says, but look, the Lord's message came to him. This man, Eliezer, will not be your heir. Instead, a son who comes from your own body will be your heir. Look, the Lord took him outside and said, gaze into the sky and count the stars. And he nudges Abraham, if you're able to count them. And he says, so will your descendants be. And the text says, Abraham believed the Lord. And then God says, listen, I called you out of your homeland into this new space. I've invited you into this land, and I promise you one day it will be yours. Abraham says out loud what we'd all be thinking. He's like, okay, but how do I know? How can I be sure? So naturally, God says, go, bring me a 3-year-old female calf, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a dove, and a young pigeon, like you do. And it says he took all these animals, split them in half, laid the halves facing each other, but didn't split the birds. Does this make sense to anybody? Is this normal for us? It's a little bit weird, right? Like, what's going on here? What's God doing? What's Abraham doing? And why all of a sudden, when God said, go get these things, he started slicing and dicing these animals into pieces? Well, what's weird to us, back then in the ancient Near East was very normal. Abraham was doing with God what was called a blood path covenant. Very common. That's why Abraham just knew what to do. And I was trying to think of like something in our culture that like when you hear something, you know like what to do after that, like a response you might have just automatically. And I have one, but I need your help today, okay? So if I were to go, Sweet Caroline. Exactly. Someone goes, Sweet Caroline, you go, ba, ba, ba. That's how our culture works. So when God says, hey, I need a calf and a goat and a ram and a dove and a pigeon, Abram's like, oh, of course, we're doing a blood path covenant. Yeah, I'll get them. And he starts slicing them up. In a blood path covenant, what they would do is really sacred ceremony, often between this greater party and a lesser party. Maybe it's 2 kings, or maybe it was a groom-to-be and his father-in-law. A really important commitment, often like a marriage ceremony. And they would take these animals, they'd slice them down the middle and lay them out. They'd find like a ravine or a gully where they would kind of meet in the middle. They'd put the one half on one side, one half on the other side, and they would walk through the middle of the animals. They'd often don these white robes. So as they walked, the hem of the robe would get covered in the blood of the animals. It's kind of icky, kind of gross. But you see the seriousness, right? And what they were saying is if one of us breaks this covenant, may this blood be our blood, be my blood instead. In our story, this unusual thing happens. As the sun sets, a deep sleep falls on Abram. And in the darkness, this smoking fire pot and this blazing torch, two symbols of God's presence, passes through the blood path. Well, Abraham had just passed out next to it. Abram never gets up, and God alone walks the blood path. God's saying, Abram, I know you won't keep your end of the deal. And I will take responsibility for both parties. When you fail to keep covenant, I will bear the curse and I will bear the cost. Well, Abraham sleeps. God walks. That's what God is like. He's a covenant-keeping God who commits himself to us even when he knows that we are going to fail. I think we can look at this God of the Old Testament and think he's the cranky God, the angry God, the mean God. But Jesus, he's like the nicer version. But I think when you really look, when you read the story, you see that over and over again, this same God who was back then is the same expression in Jesus. The same God pursuing connection, pursuing commitment with his people over and over again. He commits to us even though he knows we're going to fail. And Jesus is the exact same way. He calls these disciples, these fishermen, tax collector, ordinary people he knows will let him down, but he chooses them anyway. And time again, they fail him. Think about the night he was arrested. He's taken into custody, and all his disciples, they abandon him, they flee. He's all alone. Peter, one of his closest friends, who said, I'll never betray you. I swear on my life, I'll give my life for you, Jesus. That very night, he denies him 3 times. Or Judas betrays him for 30 pieces of silver and seals it with a kiss. His closest friends, he's been with them for 3 years and investing in them, pouring into them. Think about the Last Supper. They're at this table, reclining around it. He's looking across the table at Judas, across the table at Peter. These men who he loves and cares for, who he knows are going to abandon him. That night he takes this bread and he breaks it. He says, this is my body broken for you. Then he takes a cup. He gives thanks and says, this cup is the new covenant in my blood poured out for you. He knows these people are sitting there, they're going to betray him and leave him and abandon him. And he makes covenant with them anyway. If I was there at that table, if I knew they'd all leave me, it'd be really hard for me to commit to them anyway. But that's exactly what Jesus does. He's echoing Genesis 15, walking the blood path alone. But this time, it's his own blood he's offering. It's his blood poured out for the covenant. At the cross, Jesus bears the curse of covenant breaking. He takes on himself the result of the failure of his disciples, the result of the failure of the Israelites, of Abraham's family, the result of the failure of the entire world. Because God isn't waiting for perfect partners, for someone's perfect commitment. He's making a perfect promise to you and inviting you to accept it. And he's willing to pay the price when we don't live up to it. All through Scripture, God makes and keeps commitments. From Noah to Abram to Israel to David to Jesus. Committing to humanity and to us. And what happens next after these guys all leave him, deny him, betray him? He comes back and says, I'm not done with you yet. He meets Peter on a beach, and he's like, Peter, I still want you to lead my church. And when Thomas is looking at the holes in his hands, like, Thomas, I still want you. He comes to all his disciples in the upper room and says, you're still going to be my people. And in fact, my very spirit is going to come down on you, is going to fill you. And you're going to go out and show the world my faithful presence. You're the ones that I've chosen despite everything. These same deniers and abandoners have become the leaders of the church. They're going to put the very nature of God on display for all of humanity. In Acts 2, it says this, it says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. They were together and held everything in common. That's commitment. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. The church becomes this covenant community. And they aren't just private commitments with them and God, but they're public, communal commitments. They bind themselves together as a community. And as they live out this covenant, offering faithful presence, offering commitment to each other, expressing the presence of Jesus, people are drawn into that. Our world is longing for people that will be committed to them, that will be faithfully present in their life, who will make and keep commitments to them. These ideas are all over our Bible. Even Paul writes to the Romans, he says, be devoted to one another in love, joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with Lord people who are in need. Practice hospitality. To the Galatians, he says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. The writer of Hebrews says, consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, encouraging one another. These are the things community does together. We make space for others. We hold space for one another. And when we falter, we allow ourselves to be held by the community. I know that making and keeping commitments is not easy. It's messy. We won't do it perfectly. We have people around us who hold space for us and stay committed to us, so we keep making them anyway. Think about a marriage vow. Like at a wedding, people make these vows to each other, to have and to hold, till death do us part, and for work, and sickness and in health. We add our own vows, like I'll always put you first, I'll always serve you, you're my number one, always. I don't know a couple that has kept all these vows perfectly. We all seem to miss the mark. And I know not all marriages work out, and even thinking about vows might be painful to think about how you've been let down, how fallible people are. But we keep on making vows. I'm sure there's a wedding happening today somewhere where someone's making these exact same vows, and they're going to fail at them. But vows aren't guarantees, but they're a hopeful goal for us. They're a trajectory for which we aim, something to aim toward. And because we don't do them perfectly, we don't throw them away or give them up. We come back to them. We recommit to them. Because vows aren't about flawless performance. They're about faithful presence. Aiming for them despite the fact that we can abandon and betray and scatter. Marriage is a picture of covenant. A picture where you're invited to keep on choosing over and over and over again. It isn't about coercion or manipulation. It's about choosing to remain committed. And it's the kind of faithfulness we're called into as God's people. In a culture of subscriptions and easy cancellations, of busyness, so easy to say, I did it for a couple of days, but I can't do it anymore. I'll do it for a week and then give up on it Or how often do we say, I'm sorry, I just didn't have time? Can I say today that I didn't have time is a massive lie that we tell ourselves? We all have the same 24 hours in every day. From the teen flipping burgers to mom taking kids to practice and to sports and to dance to the CEO at a huge company, we've all got the same time. The difference is priorities. When we say I don't have time, what we're saying is that wasn't my priority. And that's okay. You have different priorities. Just be honest with yourself. Like, that wasn't my priority. It's okay to say. But if you keep saying didn't have time, you're letting time be this villain for you and you're not being honest with yourself about what your actual reality is in life. Commitments force us to face our priorities. I remember back when my first jobs, my first kind of real-ish jobs, I was a paper boy, delivering papers, 6 a.m., cold Canadian winters. I remember just getting my yellow and black winter jacket on and my hat, and I had this Walkman I'd make mixtapes on, and these yellow headphones I put in my ears, and I'd put the papers on, I'd sludge through the Canadian snow and slush, and it was horrible, especially Saturdays. They shoved the papers full of extra flyers and stuff. They're twice as heavy and twice as thick. I have to put on 2 bags, one on each side, and just try to make my way down the street wearing an extra 50 pounds. I'm like 12 years old. I remember some mornings I'd knock on my mom's door and be like, Mom, would you drive me today? And she would roll out of bed and put her coat on and start the car up and crank the heat, bundled up in the driver's seat. I'd open the door, running out, dropping paper off, running back, grab more papers. She's like, close the door, you're letting the cold air in. Oh, man. I had this one customer. If I was like 5 minutes past 7 when they were due, he'd be calling the paper saying, where's my paper? And I'm like, bro, I'm 12 years old. I've been your paper boy for like 4 years. It's going to get there. Wait 1 second. I'm trying my hardest, okay? The times that I wanted to quit, I didn't want to get up. I'd oversleep. Mom would call down, Josh, it's almost 7. Get out of bed. Man, there were times where I didn't want to do it. My parents, being good parents, would say, you know what? You committed to this. You got to do what you said you're going to do. You got to get up. If you want to quit, you can quit someday, but not today. Today you got papers to deliver. And every paper I walked to a door, every paper I shoved in my bag was an act of commitment. And it was shaping me and forming me and teaching me as a kid how to make and keep commitments to people in my life. As much as I hated that job at times, it taught me something about life. Commitments matter. Even when they're inconvenient and it's early and you don't want to get up and it's cold, commitments, they confront our comfort. They expose our excuses. But they can form us into people who can be relied upon. I'm not saying if you're stuck in a scenario that's bad for you, it's unhealthy, it's toxic, it's hurting you, you should just hold on and stay because you're guilty, you're forced to. There are things that you have to let go of at times. There are things that aren't life-giving for you, that aren't healthy for you, that aren't going to feed you or nourish you. I think God might be calling some of us into things that are going to be good for us, that are going to encourage, that are going to help us. You might need to discern today what you need to cut out of your life and find some commitments that are going to be good for you, that are going to be what God is calling you into. Make some room, some space for something new. Here's why I think all of this matters. Is that when we make and keep commitments, even small ones, we're formed. We're shaped away from these non-committal, flaky, easy-canceling people, these habits, towards a reliable, faithful presence in our world. We can be a reflection of this God who has always made and kept commitments to his people, even though they abandoned him. We can become these image bearers of what God is like. We were created to mirror God's covenant faithfulness in our world. When you show up for somebody, when you keep your word, you hold space for each other in the church, you're more than just being reliable. You're bearing God's image. You're showing our world that that's what his faithful presence is like. If you're here back during our Nest initiative about a little over a year ago, we had this idea of making space in our building, our budget, and our lives. We had this one person we were each praying for, someone that we're going to pray for and be with, and when the opportunity came, allow ourselves to be invited in. We're saying, I'll be present with you. I'll be committed to you, waiting for your invitation, because that is what God is like. He's present and patient and waiting to be invited into covenant. And he's already paid the price. It's not about effort or scheduling. It's about formation, being people who reflect God's character. People are longing for people to be present with them over time. Today in this space, I want to invite you to consider, is there something in your mind or space in your life that God might be inviting you to make a new commitment? Maybe you already have this idea in your head. Maybe in your mind for the past weeks, you've been thinking, I really feel like it's time for me to do this. You have been putting it off, or you may have a really clear picture today what that looks like for you. I would say just be willing to step into that. But today, if you're not totally sure what it might be or what your next thing might be, a practice you could pick up, I was going to give you a couple quick ideas, some small things. Right here at Westwinds, some easy ways to make a small commitment. Be joining one of our serving teams, our volunteer teams. It's like twice a month. You show up, you hold the door, you make some coffee, and in that process, you make space for somebody to feel welcome, to feel hospitable. Maybe you want to practice being committed to giving. Maybe you want to give $1 a week for now till Christmas, let's say. I don't care how much it is. But you're like, you know what? I want to work on being a more committed kind of person who makes and keeps covenants with people to be a better reflection of Jesus. So I want to give $1 a week because I said I would. I'll do that for 12 weeks. And that might be your next step. Maybe it's being in a table. Table season launches today, the kickoff. It's not too late, you could be at a table. Maybe just being here. Maybe you haven't been here like 6 weeks, and today you're like, you know what? Today I'm going to go. And for you, that's what you need. Like, I just need to be with my people in God's presence on a regular basis. And for 4 weeks, I'm going to be here. Or it's possible that your life is just chaos. You've got so much going on. You've got kids you're driving everywhere. You got a busy job. You don't know how you can take on one more thing. You're overwhelmed. I would just say, would you let us hold space for you? Let us be committed to you. Let's be a space where you can just be and rest and be restored. Let's be a place where you're welcomed. And we will hold that commitment to you because that's what God does for us. Let us put that on display for you. And if your life is too crowded, if you have too much going on, but you know there's things that God's inviting you into, but you got to cut something out, I would say figure out what to cut out today. There might be good things in your life that you like, but they aren't the best things. They're getting in the way of what God is inviting you into. Don't be afraid to reorganize your priorities. Say, God, what do you have for me? What's going to impact your kingdom? What are you inviting me into this morning? Yes, we'll fail at some of these. We won't keep them all perfectly, but that doesn't make them meaningless. The point isn't about perfection, but about faithful presence over time, we keep showing up. We keep returning again and again and again. And in that process, in that practice, we're shaped into people that look like Jesus. From Genesis 15 to the Last Supper to the early church, it's the same story. Making and keeping commitments, it forms us into people who say Jesus is Lord of all in our lives. We orient ourselves around that truth. We embody his presence in our world and put his covenant promises into action and on display for the world around us. So may we, as God's covenant people, invited into connection with him, keep showing up, keep saying yes. As we make and keep commitments, we embody a God who's never stopped making and keeping commitments to his people. Would you pray with me today? God, I'm grateful for your faithfulness. Despite our failings and our imperfections, you've never given up on us. Us here and your church for eternity, you have been making and keeping commitments to us, and you keep inviting us back. Would you show us today how you want to shape us and form us, what it is in our life you want to work on or walk with or sit with us, what we need to get rid of or just receive healing or rest from. Make us into image bearers today that live out your faithful presence in our world. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.